What is up, everybody? Welcome back to another video. In today's video, we're diving into episode number 5 of finding a general manager for the Detroit Lions. Today's spotlight is on former GM for the New York Giants, Jerry Reese. Let's get it started.
I got to shout out DoseOfDion, man, because it was actually the first time I went live on YouTube. And, guys don't know, DoseOfDion, he put out a lot of good content for the Detroit Lions.
Welcome everybody to another video. Glad you guys are here. And yes, we're talking about another general manager candidate, but this isn't just something random. It's not like I just say, hey, today we're talking about Jerry Reese. No, the reason we're talking about Jerry Reese today is because he has been rumored to the Detroit Lions, and I have heard, according to CBS, this is the strongest rumor yet. Now, there is no interview set up, but this is the strongest rumor yet. Now, it's super early. We still have 4 weeks left in the regular season, so we got a long way to go, okay? We got a long way to go when it comes to hiring a general manager, and we may not even hire a general manager, right? I mean, it may not even happen. We have no idea what these next 4 games are going to bring, but I will say this. Because there's rumors out there, and because we have so much time, we might as well look at him anyways. So we're looking at Jerry Reese today. Now, I'm going to try to do this a little bit differently. I'm going to try to keep it a little bit shorter, a little bit sweeter, if you know what I'm saying. Not the 30-minute, not the documentary, okay? I know, like, some people may like that. And if you guys like that, let me know. I will do that again. But I'm going to test a little bit differently. I'm going to test the waters, try to make it about half that time, a little bit different of a format, just so it's quicker. That way you're not sitting here and you're like, oh, wow. Okay, well, this was a great video, but now it's nighttime. Like, okay, you know what I'm saying? I don't want to do that to you. So let's dive right into this. Let's quickly go through his background, and then I'll set up the format. So the background for Jerry Reese is that he was a high school football player and a college football player. His high school team was very good. He played college at UTM. Don't tell me you don't know about UTM. Don't tell me you don't know about the University of Tennessee Martin. Then became an assistant coach there, so he got his opportunity. But his first NFL opportunity came with the New York Giants. And look, he worked his way through the ranks. He was with the New York Giants for over 20 years. Over 20 years. Now he doesn't have a job. He's unemployed right now. But he spent a lot of time with the Giants, worked his way up, had tons of experiences throughout, which I don't think is something that you can substitute. That experience is just something that you can't just find anywhere. Not everybody has the experience to go through it all. So he started as a scout with the Giants. Then in 2002, he became the director of pro personnel. And in 2007, he became their general manager. And from 2007 all the way through 2017, he was the GM until he was fired with Ben McAdoo. Now, the difference in this video is we're going to try to make a case for and try to make a case against him. Now, this is using what I've learned from Giants fans, things like that, because the Giants fan base, was kind of split, not like an even split, but it was split to a point where there were some people after he was fired that were like, no, this was not his fault, this is not his problem, but most fans were happy he was gone. However, now that he's been gone for a few years, some people have even looked back and said, well, I kind of miss Jerry Reese just a little bit. So we'll take a look at both sides for sure, but I think there is an argument for both. There's also pros and cons with both because there's pros and cons about every guy we look at. I think number one right now on my GM list is still at Dodds. I think he's at Dodds. I think it is right now, if he wants to be a GM. I want to make sure he wants to be a general manager first, but I think it's probably at Dodds. However, there's a lot of guys to look through, and, that could definitely change. I could just have a change in heart, and I'm like, you know what? No, I think it's this guy now. So it may change as we go, just to learn about the guys. So taking a look at Jerry Reese and, kind of diving into the case for and against. A quick little overview of his time with the New York Giants. If you looked at his resume and, it was just like an application, right? You filled out the application. It was like, okay, how many playoff appearances do you have? How many Super Bowl rings do you have? It was actually pretty good in that fact of that he was there for about a decade as their general manager, and in that decade he had 4 playoff appearances and 2 Super Bowl rings, right? They beat the Patriots. And okay, you look at that and you're saying to yourself, wow, that's pretty darn good, but it goes a little bit deeper because I believe in his 5 of the last 6 years as their general manager, they weren't even a playoff team. So that scares a lot of people, but there's still a case that maybe that wasn't all his fault, but it's clearly not a very good look. So we'll take a look at that. Also, he worked with Tom Coughlin, and it seemed like with Tom Coughlin, there was a solid relationship going there, but when they decided to hire Ben McAdoo, which apparently wasn't his guy, things kind of seem to go downhill. We know Ben McAdoo is no longer their head coach, and Pat Shermer anymore. Now it is actually Joe Judge. And I think that tells you how important a head coaching position is because Joe Judge has them sitting at 5-7. They seem to be competing, again, but head coaches are important. It's important to have a head coach that can bring the best out of his players for sure. There definitely is a balance there, so it's difficult to sometimes do these videos. Before we get into the pros and cons, first off, can we get like a food emoji or something in the comments just to let me know that you guys watched this far? I do appreciate that if you do. Okay, this took a while. A lot of numbers here, but basically I wanted to try it. So we're going to get to the pros and cons, good drafting, bad drafting, things like that, and we can talk and we can throw the opinions out there, But how about we dive into some numbers? Let's dive into legitimate numbers to back up what we're saying here. Jerry Reese here, okay? Now, this is 2010 through 2015. So we're looking at 5-year span, okay? A 5-year span, 2010, 2015. He became the general manager in 2007. He was relieved of his duties in 2017. So looking from 2010 to 2015. And if you go through those drafts, remember, this came out in 2015. The results were counted in 2015. So this came right after that 2015 draft. If you go through that draft, you will see by the results. I'll throw some screenshots on the screen. 26% of those players became starters in those 5 years of the draft. 28% of those players became backups. So that means 54% of the players are still on the team in those 5 years of drafts. That's not very good, just a little bit above average. It's not completely awful as long as you're hitting on good pieces, I guess. As you guys can see by who they draft, they will bring offensive linemen, they will bring trenches in, but it's the fact that they haven't had a lot of success there. But where they really haven't had a lot of success is defensive backs. For whatever reason, it must be just very difficult to find cornerbacks. The biggest stat that pops out to me is this one. 42.8% are out of the league. 42.8%. I wanted to put this into perspective for you guys. Bob Quinn was just fired as our general manager, and I didn't think he was completely awful at drafting. I really didn't. I didn't think it's because he brought in Patricia he had to go. Bob Quinn, from 2016 to 2020, for my math, players out of the league, 20%. 42.8% out of the league for Jerry Reese, 20% for Bob Quinn. And Bob Quinn was fired. That is scary. That's scary bad. That's not good. That's really concerning. Okay, how about free agency? He actually doesn't do a bad job in free agency. The issue with free agency is this. They are forced to go through free agency because they're not able to do well enough with their drafts to get players, in their primes or to have players, be the foundation. They have been relying on free agency because their drafts have been so rough. I'd give them like a 1 or 2 out of 10 on drafts. They've hit on talent early rounds, but you can see there's just a lot of misses. There's just a lot of misses, and the numbers don't lie. That's a lot of misses, no question. And they don't hit on a lot of gems in the late rounds either, especially in the more recent drafts. I mean, you go back to when, they win the Super Bowls, the drafts were good, but they've really started to slow down, and we'll talk about that a little bit more. When it comes to free agency, they've done a pretty good job, honestly. And when it comes to salary cap, people are thinking, okay, well, they're spending a ton of money. Actually, their dead money is not bad. So free agency, that's not an issue. He can bring in free agency talent. That's actually something that's like, okay, that's kind of a refreshing. We didn't do perfect, I would say, with free agency this offseason. But the drafting is extremely concerning. And for me personally, knowing that he was a scout and he went through all this, that concerns me. I know he's hit on picks, especially back, when he first became the general manager. But that's scary. How much of that was him? We have to assume he was the final decision maker at the GM. And when you see those numbers, to me, that makes me a little bit worried. No question about it. So that's huge. Trades and free agency, not bad. But building through the draft, yikes. First goal here is I'm going to try to sell Jerry Reese to you as if you are a buyer, right? I'm going to try to sell him. I'm going to try to market Jerry Reese to you. Then I'll come back and turn around and I'll do the flip side and try to tell you why to stay away from this guy. Stay away as far as you possibly can. Guys, so let's take a look at the pros and cons here, or maybe the case for and against a guy like Jerry Reese. Now, trust me, I've been looking at this stuff for a while now, pretty much all day. So I think I have a pretty good feeling on where I sit with Jerry Reese and the pros and cons here. So we'll start off with the pros. I'm going to talk about what's on the screen right here, and we'll kind of go through it. So the first one, it says the former general manager. The reason I had that one first, because I think it is the biggest factor. I think the reason that we have a guy like Jerry Reese and then we saw John Dorsey potentially tied with the Detroit Lions is simple. It's the same denominator. It's that they were both former general managers. The fact that they've had that experience, to me, that is the biggest reason that he has been tied with the Detroit Lions. Yes, the whole Corsi thing as well, as an experience as a general manager, is the reason why they are somewhat linked to the Detroit Lions, because I think the Lions are looking at it as an organization that's done a lot of bringing in guys that it's their first time, whether it's general manager, head coach, it's their first time doing something, and they come in there and it's a complete mess, and they're like, okay, I have no idea what I'm doing, and it turns into a disaster. Maybe he doesn't have the best track record, but at least if he has that experience, the Lions may be looking at it as, okay, well, he's going to step in, he's going to know what he's doing right away, so that's the biggest thing. So I think that's the biggest pro that you could take away from a guy like Jerry Reese. Probably the same thing as to John Dorsey as the biggest pro when it comes to Detroit Lions, because personally, I think that's probably what they're looking for, and I think that's why the rumors have came out for those two guys. Next up, somewhat accountable. Now, this one's interesting, and I don't say he's not necessarily not accountable because I understand what he did here, but he did hold accountability for their tough start when in his final year as their general manager, right? They got off to a 1-6 start. He said himself, I am the one who built this roster. I am the reason we are 1-6. He held complete responsibility for it. But then as about the time he got fired, he kind of said, look, I'm a big part of this, but, there's also other factors into it as well. And he's not wrong. Everybody deserves part of the blame. Head coaching, assistant coaches, players, everybody deserves part of the blame. So I get that. And I understand because at that time he's probably like, okay, wait, if I'm going to go down, I'm going to go down. Y'all are coming with me, right? I mean, I understand that completely. So I would say he was somewhat accountable. He was accountable during the season, maybe a little bit less when the time he got fired, but I do understand it. He helped build Super Bowl teams. Now, the 2 Super Bowls that they did have came in the first 4 years of him as a general manager. And some people will say that it was necessarily him just taking over the past GM's work. Of course, he's worked before, and he just rode those Super Bowls. Well, I think, yes, there still was talent there. He did make some major moves, some major pieces, and 7 of his 8 first draft picks had a major impact on their first Super Bowl win. 7 of their first 8. His drafts went really well early, and he had a lot of players out there that he brought in that served a very big role on those first couple of Super Bowl teams. So, yes, some of it probably did carry over, but it's a complete lie. It's completely wrong to say that he didn't have an impact on building those Super Bowl teams, helping build those Super Bowl teams. So you have to give him that, no questions asked. Wide receiver evaluation. This comes in the draft form and also when it comes to free agency. Now, he did draft a lot of receivers, so I can understand why he hit on a lot of them. But for some reason, he does seem to have a pretty good track record when it comes to bringing in wide receivers, whether that's free agency or draft. You see guys like Odell, and you see guys free agency like Manningham, Victor Cruz. I mean, Hicks. He has a pretty good, I would say, history of bringing in wide receivers, that's for sure, but he also did bring in a lot of them. And he also had issues at other places when it came to bringing in certain players. So we'll get to that when it comes to the cons. Finally, didn't get a fair chance. Now, this is a case that if you were really trying to sell this, if I'm trying to sell this to you guys, which I will in this particular situation, here's the case that I would make, okay? If I was his agent, this is the case that I would make. Look, he didn't have a fair chance when he was with the New York Giants. Okay, think about the Giants situation here. He comes in, helps lead them to 2 Super Bowls in his first 4 years there. Look, the 3 years that they didn't have success from 2013 to 2015, when they had the 6-10s, the 7-9s, because they were having winning seasons up to that point. They were a top 3 most injured team in those 3 years. So they're dealing with some major injuries that even those key pieces they were missing, that's not something he can control. Now, I do think some of that has to go a little bit on Jerry Reese because, like we talked about before, he will bring in certain guys that have had maybe issues with health in the past. So some of that goes on him a little bit, but there were some major injuries that of course he can't, control. And that's a big part of football. Obviously next man up, but it still is a big part of football. So that's something that he couldn't control. One, this wasn't the guy that he wanted. And we actually got a quote from him after he was fired, I believe, where he came out and said, that's not who I wanted. Now, obviously you'll say that because you're fired and you're kind of mad. Those were some rumors at the time that, okay, they're bringing in Ben McAdoo to be next head coach. That way they can keep Eli Manning because they don't want to get another head coach and have him go hire a head coach and move on Eli Manning because Eli Manning was so loved by the organization because of the 2 Super Bowls that they were kind of locked with him. And then we saw how weird it kind of ended with the whole benching him in 2017. And it was like, okay, why is he benched now? You stopped the streak. It was just kind of weird. It was a really ugly situation. But again, still making the case for him. And then he didn't really get his opportunity to bring in his own quarterback because you had Eli Manning there, because you let Ben McAdoo become the next head coach, which is rumored to be more of the ownership, less of a decision Jerry Reese made. Because he didn't get to pick his head coach, now you had to rely with Eli Manning because Eli Manning was still there. They did that to keep Eli Manning there. And their offense was terrible. Their offense was awful when Eli Manning was there. I mean, you look at the season that they had, the playoffs, that one season they made the playoffs right before he got fired that year. With Ben McAdoo, the defense was incredible. And heading into that season, they had tons of money to spend. They spent $105 million guaranteed dollars. And look, just spending money doesn't equal good players, but he hit on tons of talent on the defensive side. They had a top 3 defense that season, and it helped make a playoff team, and it completely overshadowed how bad their offense was. I mean, their offense was just terrible. That is probably the major case I would make for him, is that, hey, look, he didn't get a fair shake with the New York Giants. This guy was there for a decade, and he didn't get to pick his own head coach. He didn't get to go get his own quarterback. That's a big problem. That would be probably the biggest case that I would make if I was like his agent or something. I'm trying to sell him to somebody else. However, there are some major concerns as well. There's good, but there's also some concerns. First off, draft success dropped. It did drop big time. I mean, look, everybody's going to miss draft picks. There's no question about it. But when you see some of the success that he had early as a talent evaluator, and then you look at how it kind of went as years went on, and unfortunately dropped. Now, he did hit on some pieces here and there, and I will give him credit. It seemed like the first and second rounds, he was consistently able to hit on some really solid pieces, but it seemed like after the second round, they just never could hit that much talent. I mean, it's difficult. It really is difficult, no question, but there was definitely some major misses, and he really didn't hit on much talent after those rounds that had a very big impact. Maybe they were just okay players, but they never really hit on a big guy. They didn't hit on a Kenny Galladay. They weren't able to get a steal in the third round. They weren't able to hit on those, big name starting offensive linemen that the Lions were able to do with Bob Quinn, and that was an issue, right? Especially when his early drafts went so well. So that was definitely a major concern. We look at him. You see rough trenches. I say that as in, trenches, right? The trenches didn't seem like they were able to find tons of talent there. People said that it was his fault that Eli Manning was protected. I will, kind of protect him a little bit on that one, and saying that, look, 3 of the 5 offensive linemen that were out there were first round or second round picks. Now, maybe he didn't hit on them perfectly, but they were top picks, so he did try to surround him with some help. Eli Manning just won. Well, he wasn't the same Eli Manning, but also he didn't have the best protection either. Relied on free agency. Now, this is necessarily a bad thing in the case that, hey, he was good at free agency in terms of he was able to hit on some talent in free agency to really make up for the lack of success in the draft, which honestly is a pro. That could easily be a pro, no question. But the fact that he relied on that is a problem because building through the draft is usually a way to have success over a long period of time because, they're young guys. There's guys that can be there for a long time. You can give them the contract extensions. They got 4 years on the rookie deal plus the 5th-year option. You can build through that for a long time. But if you can't hit success there, now you're just completely relying on, hitting a guy in free agency, redoing it next year. But it's very difficult because it's going to be hard to find guys like that consistently, and that's a problem. So consistency on a team usually helps when it comes to the draft. If you can't find that through the draft, and you're trying to really rely on free agency, you're going to see ups and downs, right? You're going to see peaks and valleys, and that's a big problem. But free agency-wise, he seems to be pretty solid at free agency, so that's good because we've had issues in that category. Most fans wanted him out. I don't think this is a huge shot against him because, look, fans are going to be upset when the results aren't there, and fans aren't always right. I think the Browns are a perfect example that a lot of people, mock the Browns. Oh, you hired Kevin Stefanski. What were you doing? I think the Browns are the only team laughing right now sitting at 9-3 because of that, right? So, look, I'm not taking this one as a big against him, but it was true that, a lot of people were okay with him gone. Now, there were a couple people that did protect him. There still are people that are saying, hey, I kind of wish we had him back because we have a mess right now with Gettleman. We'll see how that turns out. It seems like, they may be getting something going here this year at 5-7. But, it's just something because, again, it's the fan base, and they weren't very happy. And finally, he missed 5 of the last 6 playoff appearances in his last 6 years. They missed 5 playoffs of their last 6. They had that playoff year where the defense was good. And it's not all on him. I do think that, again, to the fair chance that he didn't get the best fair crack at it. And Ben McAdoo was not a good hire. He should not have been the head coach. And we saw why that was the case very quickly. So, yes, he does deserve some blame from that. But, again, he can't do everything. He's not the coaches. He's not the players. This losing games goes on everybody. So, I will give him that. So, okay, those are your pros and cons. Definitely some pros, and I think the former GM's the biggest one, but there are some major cons as well. If he bring in a head coach, I have no idea because we haven't get to see him pick his own guy for head coach. I don't know what he would do. I mean, if you think that he was the guy that made the decision to bring up Ben McAdoo, which are not the reports, then who knows? Maybe he'd keep Darrell Bevell as the head coach because he's the interim, and that was basically another interim head coach. I don't know what he would do because he's never done it before. And the Giants are not a very good team right now where there's a lot of assistant coaches where it's like, oh, wow, that guy's popular. Hey, that guy could become a next head coach. That's not really how it's looking for them. So I don't know what he would do when it comes to would he keep Matthew Stafford. Look, I think we kind of understand Matthew Stafford's a very talented quarterback. And, as an experienced GM, if he wants the opportunity to say, I want to go get my own quarterback, fine. But I definitely think it could be, with a lot of GMs, the way I'm looking at it now is that, okay, hey, look, to keep Matthew Stafford, it makes sense because of the whole money situation and just draft a quarterback to develop behind him. I can see him doing that, wanting to go get his opportunity to pick his quarterback, but it doesn't necessarily mean that he has to start right away. If Matthew Stafford wants to stay here and keep playing with the Lions, it just makes sense. It really just comes down to more Matthew Stafford. And again, these last 4 games are going to tell a lot because Darrell Bevell is able to do some very big things with the Lions as their head coach. Then, who knows what they're looking for in a GM. Now you're looking for a GM that has to fit with Darrell Bevell, not necessarily a GM that wants to go get his own head coach. And the reports have been the Lions want to find the head coach first. So you're going to have to find a head coach that can pair with the head coach that's out there. That's just the case right now. So, yeah, would he hire a new head coach? Maybe he wouldn't have to if Darrell Bevell wins the job. And then they're just bringing a GM on top of Darrell Bevell to just work with him. And you know what? I think there could be the potential that they could work well together. I don't really know. Those are questions that with Jerry Reese, there's just not enough, basically that we can base on that. Yes, he would like him. No, he would not like him. Yes, he would like the quarterback or whatnot. But the Lions reportedly are interested. I think there's a case for him against him. I don't know if one outweighs the other. Maybe Connors weigh out the pros here. If I had to give him a grade out of 10, where would I put him? Maybe a little bit below average to average. I think this is a guy that I would be necessarily mad if we brought in because I do like the fact that he's a former GM. He has experience. He helped build Super Bowl teams. I mean, heck, how many teams would love to have 2 Super Bowls in 10 years? You can't ask for that. And maybe, if he gets the right head coach lined up with him, the rumors before were that the Lions would hire the head coach first. So whether that's Bevell or a different head coach and they get the right one lined up, maybe he is able to help him find talent. Maybe he wasn't able to have much draft success because of, the whole head coaching situation and how that turned out. It was kind of a mess in New York, no question about it. But at the same time, I'm not completely in love with him where I'm saying, yeah, this is the guy that I want to go get. I also don't necessarily hate him as a candidate. So I'm kind of in the middle here, maybe a little bit more to a little bit under average of how much I actually like this. But I think the former GM, the experience part there is huge. And also, you just can't get over the fact that there's 2 Super Bowls here. I mean, it's hard to look past it. You're like, oh, yeah, there's issues, but 2 Super Bowls. It looks good. It really does look good. And you're just kind of like, okay, well, you know, there's definitely some there because he did have success early on. So was that he struggled to evaluate talent as years went on the road? Was it that maybe the coaching just wasn't as good? What was it? There's a lot of inside issues there that are just very hard to navigate. I mean, maybe he just needs a head coach to work with, the head coach of the Maybe a guy like Bevel is the perfect fit for this guy. Maybe it is. Maybe he just needs the right head coach and this guy could be perfect. Those are just questions that we don't have answers to, unfortunately, because we can't actually interview him, right? I can see both sides of this and I can understand why the Lions would be interested. Let me know your thoughts, comments below. Thank you for watching, and I'm out. Are you kidding me right now? I had to put my helmet on for this one. Are you kidding? Look at this. Look at all these members. What? Yo, hey, shout out to all the members, man. Look how many All-Pro members there are. Like, literally, it's the whole screen, dog. This is crazy. The patrons, of course, the Hall of Fame members, man. Y'all got the gold color. It's kind of yellow, but it's supposed to be gold. Shout out to all the members, man. If you want to be a part of this, all you got to do is join the channel. But there are perks that come with it. Stay locked in the community tab if you are a member, because that's where a lot of information comes out. I appreciate all of you. What?